Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to Reflections this afternoon. Unfortunately, Buster could not be here, so I'm filling in for him. So just bear with me. But we are glad that you are coming out to support our Reflections program. And we would like to welcome John Johnson, Margie Johnson, and for being here today. And so most of us have a bias when we hear about East Tennessee. But today we will have one of those biases dispelled. So John has developed a successful career, raised a family, and distinguished himself in Morristown, Tennessee. So we will hear today about his notable public services as mayor of Morristown for 18 years. Bless you, Margie. So I've always wondered if mayor of a small town was all that Mayberry fluff, or was it really hard shovel work? So let's find out. Please join us in welcoming John.
Been introduced with lots of pictures, but that was the first time with my gun and beard. Thank you all for attending. Buster has a cold today. He was the reason he wasn't doing the introduction, but he decided if he were to show up and spread his cold, you all wouldn't appreciate it. But if Buster suggests you do something, you might want to consider doing it, and that's the reason I'm up here. We moved to, or started out, and we raised our family in Morristown, Tennessee. And that's the East Tennessee town I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. Margie was born in East Tennessee at Morristown. And then later, our daughter, Martha, who is right here beside Margie, she was born there too, but ended up living in Roanoke, and that was the attraction with her and her family to us to move to Brandon Oaks eventually and to be here in Roanoke, which has been a very rewarding experience. Some people might ask, where are we and what's the geographic implications? If you take Bristol in the top right corner and follow I-81 right down to Knoxville, you'll pass Morristown, and actually you go through a little arm of Morristown about halfway down. So we are in the heart of East Tennessee, and that's Cherokee Lake to the north of us, and we have another lake in the Newport area to the south of us. We're perhaps known as a community that has overhead sidewalks. And that was an issue that came up in the 1960s when we got our first opportunity to have a shopping district to move in with the covered shopping and everything. And the downtown merchants wanted to react to that and attract people to Morristown. So instead of just covering the sidewalks, which a lot of communities did to make them rainproof during rain, this provided a place to walk on the top. And that's what our overhead sidewalks look like. It did revitalize downtown to some extent, but not that we did a lot of commercial activities on the second floor that led off from the sidewalks, but it proved to be great for parades and celebrations. And we would frequently close the main street and have car shows and other things down there, and people could walk all around on the upper and lower levels. As I said, Margie was born there in Morristown, and I got there at age 3. So it was pretty much all that either of us knew to start We went to school, both went to school there, but through unusual circumstances, we never went to school together. We were never in the same school at the same time. But it didn't interfere with the fact that we did kind of fall in love in junior high age. And that is love that's endured that this long. She's been a wonderful wife and a supporter of everything that I did and corrected me with some things that I shouldn't be doing. But people would be fortunate, or men would be fortunate to have a wife like Margie. We both went off to college. She came to Randolph-Macon Women's College in Lynchburg, and I went to Davidson College in Davidson, North Carolina. So again, we weren't in school together. Even though she came over one time to summer school at Davidson, I wasn't there. But it worked well for the gasoline business because we went up and down the highways regularly, or I did. We served 3 years in the peacetime Army. And as I mentioned to several people, the Army asked me where we wanted to serve. And we all sat around the table and laughed at the question, filled out the forms, and said, would like to serve my Army duty on a major metropolitan city in the Eastern Seaboard. And if you know military, that's not usually, they don't usually supply you what you ask for. In our case, the orders came back 770 Broadway, New York, New York. We had a Army Ordnance Procurement District with about 800 civilians in the old Wanamaker building in Manhattan. And so I got to do a lot of my military time riding the subways from Brooklyn to Manhattan. But it was interesting and good, and we enjoyed it. And it was peacetime. We realized that so many of you all got to serve in times when it wasn't peacetime, but we thought that was normal. Only in hindsight did we realize that that is not normal for our country to be at peacetime. After I returned, or we returned to Morristown, and Margie took up her profession of being an organist for churches, and she then later became an organist choir master at the Episcopal Church in our town, and she went on to become the head of the AGO, which is the Organist Guild in Knoxville. But she had a very busy schedule in addition to raising two children, our daughter Martha and our son Rob, who home is currently in Nashville, Tennessee. My father didn't give me a lot of advice, but he said, son, if you ever have the opportunity to get involved with politics, don't. And I took that and listened very close to what he had to say. And it turned out that after serving in lots of volunteer organizations in a small town, if you're willing to take on a few extra jobs, you get invited to do everything. And that occurred. And then when an unofficial member, an unofficial leader, I should say, of county government died, and he was the supply person for Texaco products. And my father, and I was working for my father, were the supplier of Shell products in Morristown. When he died, folks said, well, maybe we need to get you up there, and asked if I would run, and did run for county government in what you would call, well, I'm not exactly sure what they call it in Virginia, but in Morristown, Tennessee at that time, what you ran for to be a commissioner in county government was justice of the peace and everything that implies. With Marge having a piano at our house and I having a whole line of prospects, we did jointly run some marriages through that front yard. After 6 years in county government, which I actually ended up spending 10 years, I ran for mayor of Morristown. And we had a very colorful mayor at the time. He has, I guess you would say he was a populist. He was a major gambler. And he was a very interesting character. And most of the projects that the Chamber of Commerce, of which I was active, ran for, he was against. So folks said we need to get somebody to run in opposition, and so I did and got a lot of support, had a very lively election, and I lost by 8 votes. And there's nothing like you're defeated and have a good friend come up to you and say, which happened, if I'd known it's going to be that close, I would have voted. And there's no response to that. I don't know how you deal with that one. Anyway, I continued in county government, and he continued as the mayor. Now, the city, however, in 4 years after that, I did run again with the help of many volunteers, and there was no better person for knocking on doors than Margie. She knew everybody in town, and that was a great asset, and she was wonderful at it. We won the next round, or this round. It was actually the second election after they were 2-year terms at the time. But once you win the election, then the question is, what do you do with it? It's kind of like the barking dog that catches the car. If you catch up with it, what do you do with it? So we discussed what to do. The town is operated by a mayor and, at that time, 4 council persons. So it was 5 votes for everything or anything, or a majority for 3 to win. So, and then the administrator was done by a paid administrator who carried out the priorities given by the elected officials. There's the city hall. This is the city hall that we constructed. These aren't all in exact sequence because you couldn't do that on the first day. But we had a very economical city hall. And then we ended up with selecting this as our city hall, and the architects in the period, and the underground parking and other features to it. But it was one of the projects that we took pride in, and those of you who are in construction business would have appreciated that building on pillars and next to a creek or part of a creek. Morristown is a blue-collar, working, manufacturing town. That's our name. That's what we have. And we had been, the town had been vigorously soliciting manufacturing to come to town since before World War II, and we were successful in many cases. Actually, just outside of town, American Inca operated, which some of you all may be familiar with. It at one time was the largest producer of viscose thread in the world. And at that time, it had 4,000 people living on the city's doorsteps. It was in the county, not in the city, but it was a major activity. And they always said that they were going to be there when nobody else was. And sure enough, they ended up being the last producer of fiber in this country, only to go out of business because they had no more customers that wanted the fiber who were in this country. One of the questions, though, that we had, one of the problems we had, that Tennessee has an unusual, I guess I ought to keep my eye on the head, back of the head too. These are some of the things we had to look over. Here's what you have. What do you want to do with it? Which changes do you want to make? Which projects do you want to pursue? And that's just a list of responsibilities of the area. Now, the mayor only has one vote, but he does, or she does, get the opportunity to be the spokesperson for the government. And that also carries with it the concept of defending everything the public thinks you did wrong. So we had a TV program with call-in, and we got lots of suggestions and assessments. But one problem we had was the Tennessee system for education, which is odd. And unlike Virginia, where the county government and the city government are separate, that's not true in most states, I think, and certainly not in Tennessee. It's an overlaying system of governments. Everybody lives in the county. Everybody pays a county tax. And then overlaying that is the city, and the city people, they also pay a city tax. And so you have to please both sides. But in education, that's hard. And so they indicated by state law, if a city wanted to provide a richer education experience than what the county can raise taxes and supply, you can do that. But legally, you have to spend more money on your system by adding to the county money, the city money. And what that does by law mean you cannot have two financially equal systems in the same county. The county always has to be the lower level funded, and the city is always the higher level funded. Well, the county never built a high school, and they used to come to us for no cost, and we were educating their kids. But finally, the cost of education got such that we couldn't do that forever, and it started a whole series of lawsuits that went on for years. And much of the question about the laws in Tennessee on how money is divided between the city and the county and whose responsibility it is was written by lawsuits which read Hamilton County versus Morristown, Tennessee, or Morristown, Tennessee versus Hamilton County. It was a division within the county that we did not need. And one possible solution to it was just have one county-wide government of your schools. Just one countywide. They raise taxes countywide, and they can elect a school board countywide. Just have one. Well, it turns out that people don't always like change. So we got the job of selling them on change, and we must have done a poor job because we had over the years 3 referendums on proposed ways to put the two together and consolidate the schools and have one school. And they voted down every single one of them. So that was number 1 on our bill. What are we going to do about it? Now, I put this one up here not because it's a city school anymore, but because it was the leading construction process in the state for high schools in 1892, a little prior to our time. That's Rose School, and it was still around when I was in elementary school, and that's where I attended elementary school. But now it's a museum, and rightly so. It should not be an educational institution. But it's kind of symbolic here of the fact that we did go out of the school business by a method that was not greeted with great enthusiasm by everybody. The leadership of the county government and the leadership of the city government got together and say, if we can't put it together legally, we'll just contract city services with the county. And we'll have a system run with everybody putting their schools in the system, Kansas City and the county doing all the finances, and the school board elected countywide, which we had, would run the system. Well, lo and behold, it was a success. It worked. However, not everybody approved of it. And it cost the mayor 4 years off in the next election. But it was worth it, because many years later, by many years, it was about 15 years later, I guess, we put before the public, do you want to continue this system by contract with one consolidated system, or do you want to go back to 2 systems? And that now, staying unchanged, was on the side of consolidation. And it worked. And it passed without much trouble at all. So we were pleased with that. So that was one of the projects we undertook. We looked at our fire department, and as you all probably know, at that time, and I guess still, how much your fire insurance costs you in your house or your business is dependent upon the capabilities of your fire department, which are judged by the underwriters. We talked to those folks, and they said, well, there are certain things you could do to improve your situation if you wanted to undertake them. And we thought trying to meet a higher standard would be a great step to go. And so we did pursue that, and we bought additional pumpers and improved the status of our ladder truck. But it turned out, to our surprise, that the biggest change that got us the most points for graduating was to rework the fire plug system, which means a lot of piping and utilities throughout the entire municipality. And as a result, we had additional training. We showed you the fire truck. What's the next one we got? Oh, and we fought fires successfully. The savings turned out to be substantial, and the beneficiaries of that on fire insurance were all the residents of the city and the businesses of the city. So it was a successful endeavor that we were rewarded for. We'd always been a place that emphasized athletic activities, and we had ball teams, baseball, softball, and that sort of thing. Oh. Let's take up the police department instead of recreation next. We thought that because fire departments work the way they do, perhaps police departments work the way. And there was not an easy access to a ranking service for police departments. But we discovered that one did exist. It was an international standard that was used both in portions of the United States and Canada. And so we signed up for it, and it took us over a year of preparation to bring everything we did in compliance with how they thought it ought to be done. And then they sent a crew in that spent several weeks with us going through all our files and employment figures and training possibilities and all of that. And we passed. We received that accreditation. And we were one of the early municipalities in our state to do that. But we also got, in addition to that, a couple of bonuses. We got a bicycle team that still exists, that patrols on bicycles. And then we also have a canine service that is of great service in drug busting and that sort of thing. And it just, that wasn't a requirement, but it was a help. And we still enjoy the benefits of training. I think we must have about four dogs at the current time or more. The accreditation is now done by the state through a program organization of state police departments. And so we don't do it with how it used to be done, but it's still done. Now the water, the recreation. We had built a water park with the assistance of the Rotary Club, which Rotary Club has done those many places, and we were a beneficiary of what they did. We had youthful sports for small kids, and we used to have BMX racing. We were an area for BMX racing, and we would have those conducted. But we also had passive parks, and where people could picnic or just spend time. And that's kind of been a principle that was started and still going on. One of the largest parks was acquired within the last few years, so that there's plenty of open space within the municipality where you can exercise. We did garbage pickup. Now, these 90-gallon buckets that you see here, they're common. Everybody has those today. Back in our time, not everybody did. And as a matter of fact, when some people looked at those buckets, said, we don't want that, we can't handle that. And consequently, we went and had to sell the idea that this is the way we're going to pick up garbage. Now, it's not a question anymore, but back then it was. So I got my 90-year-old aunt, or Margie's 90-year-old aunt, and she got one of the big buckets, and we kind of showed her how to use it and all, and she made the front page picture of the newspaper. If a 90-year-old lady can handle it, you can handle it. And sure enough, it worked, and they learned how easy it was. It was just overcoming what you weren't used to. The standards for landfills grew, and they become tougher to fill, and you had to cover everything you put in them regularly, and both and our our landfill did not meet state regulations, and so the state closed it down, but you have to have a place to do it. So we did cooperate with the county, who ran into the same problem, and we jointly set up a landfill operation that we jointly funded and we had joint use of. And it differed in some. It was operated by us. We didn't contract with others to operate it. Instead of just hauling your garbage out there and putting it in the ground and covering it with dirt, which is the prescribed way, you have to seed it with dirt, we came up with a system where you have a concrete pad inside a large building with a cube-shaped hole in the bottom of it, and you use high-powered equipment to push the trash into that hole. And then the hole has hydraulic high-pressure compaction and compacts it from all sides. And then it puts a strap around it so it becomes a block. It's about an 8 foot by 8 foot, well, I don't know what the rule is, but that's about what I'd say. It is a place where you can then have a block of trash bound together, compact, taking up little room, and you can run a forklift into it and haul it out to the field, and then you put it in against a cut dirt wall, and with a small amount of dirt you can cover the top layer, which meets the requirements. And that still operates today, but it was a more complicated system than what we had. But when nobody wants to have a landfill near their house or near their property, it was a godsend, and it worked. And this just shows kind of what it looks like with a small layer of dirt over the top layer. We're a manufacturing town, and a lot of those manufacturers are involved in just-in-time deliveries for larger activities, particularly in the automotive industry. So if you're dependent upon getting sub-supplies manufactured and shipped to you, you have to be able to meet the emergency when the emergency comes, and that will come. Some problem will occur. And so we learned that you have to have ability to fly items you would normally truck when you have to meet certain requirements. Not on a steady basis, but in emergency. And so we took our airport. This is a primary office of the airport. We don't have scheduled flights anymore. We did for a little while, but that didn't last. This is the runway. We extended the runway so that it was 5,717 feet, which made it long enough to land a Falcon jet. And we get to see them occasionally come in there, and they're off to make those last-minute deliveries in some cases to bring visiting personnel to visit their plants. And so we upgraded the airport, and we eventually replaced that terminal. I'll do this one first. When we departed from the office, we had about 70 companies that manufactured inside our little town. When I say little, the town was 25,000. The county outside of it was an equal amount, And that's still true today. It's 50-50, but it's now moved up to 30,000 and 30,000. But we had that many manufacturing plants in our town. And the reason we had that is because we thought that the way to get industry to move to your town was not to show them a farm field and say, we think we can buy it. But we bought the farm field and we put in engineered the streets and the runoff and the sewer system and the water and all the requirements, and said, if you come to us, we've got a place to put you. And of course, a lot of people say, well, that means that you all gave them lots of things. And maybe if we were doing it today, we would have to. But back then, in my time, we didn't give it away to anybody. We sold those lots and recovered most of our investment in the utilities from the sale of the land. But we were not hesitant about giving away the state's money. And you do that primarily through educational efforts in which you enter into agreements whereby you will train the new employees at the new industry. And we did that 3 times. One time before I was in office, and we did twice while I was in office. We built industrial parks, and we have 400 acres still available today that meet those requirements. Here's our largest employees. Now, in the 1920s, Morristown used to sell a lot of chickens and put them on the train and send them up to New York. Well, I find it interesting that today, the poultry processing is still the #1 employer in our area. Mahle Engine Components is a German company that today is the biggest taxpayer in the city government, or I guess in the county, in the entire county. Mahle makes aluminum pistons for the automotive industry, and it's a privately owned country, so we don't hear a lot about it. But if you watch the sports cars, and I'm talking about F1 in addition to NASCAR, they'll have that Mahle label on them, and that's because those Mahle pistons, German made, are there. And that was one of the, and I was one of those who went with the team to spend about a week with Germany, but while they were making up their minds on would they come here or would they go elsewhere. And they came to Morristown, and they've been a regular employer and leader in manufacturing business ever since in our town. Howmet that came to us as a French company. I don't know who owns them now, but they make the blades that you see in jet engines. I mean, you don't see them, but they're in there. You see them in cutaways. And at the time they came, there was not a jet aircraft in the free world that didn't fly with Howmet parts. They made these ceramic heat-resistant blades. And that was one of the things they made, but they made jet aircraft engine parts. Team Technologies did automotive parts. J-Tech, J-T-E-K-T, that used to be, it was a Japanese company known as Toyota. And they used to make parts for Toyota, which was different, we learned. And I think that had something to do with why they go by a different terminology today, rather than try to teach these East Tennesseans how to say Toyota or Toyota and differentiate between the two. Tough Torque Corporation makes shifting gears and transmissions for small items or little tractors that you would mow your yard with or clear with or that sort of thing. And you probably recognize these other names, Kawasaki, Mentor used to be a Rockwell process that put high processed steel on the ends of truck axles. But Colgate Palmolive, that's toothpaste. And if you brushed your teeth this morning with Colgate, that came from Morristown. And anyway, that's just a few of the ones we've got. And let me have one more here. Oop, okay. That's kind of our manufacturing and what we did and how we made it work. And it continues to expand. There's a new company that just arrived from Belgium, Van Hool, who have bought their property and they have their plans for their building, but they delayed it a while. They make buses for the tourist industry in Europe, and they wanted to start making them for tourist industry in the United States. And they are scheduled to become the biggest employer now. But I don't know if I've changed your perception of what it's like to be in East Tennessee, but that's what it was like in East Tennessee for us. And I appreciate your listening to it, and I know that you all have towns and places that you're impressed with and like and could tell us about, but that's our story. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah.
So the question is, how did you get to Roanoke from Morristown?
Well, some of us decided that age might have an impact in our life. And we thought, based on our experience, it would be great to have a place near either our son or daughter. And our daughter lives in Roanoke, and she's here with us today. Any other?
Go ahead, Jan.
Have you considered running for mayor of Roanoke?
So the question is, have you considered running for mayor of Roanoke?
No. It's in life, there's times when you need to quit what you're doing. And I'm pleased to say we've quit.
Jan?
This is kind of a crazy question. If you don't care to address it, that's fine. My daughter went to school in Knoxville at the university.
Mhm.
So we stopped in your town one time. We were looking for a place to eat or something, I forget. And we got off the interstate and came into town and got twisted around somehow so that we didn't get back onto the interstate very easily. I wonder if you can help me think about that a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on it?
So
Well-
the question is about the demographics and the getting around Morristown.
Right. Well, yes, we've put in, we have a northern entrance, a middle entrance, and now a southern entrance, and can take you out there. You'll have to come in and see our new access to I-81. There are 3 accesses to 81 now, and if you were headed to Knoxville, you'd want the most southern of them.
I forget which way we were headed, but thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. And so, well, now we know that small town mayor is more than most of us could ever want. So, fluff or shovel work, it is all the above. So, thank you, John, for speaking today, and we look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, Tricia.